Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Boon of Wireless podcast. I'm Jon Horovitz, founder and president of Atrium Unlimited Consulting, coming to you as always, high above the streets in northern New Jersey at ANJ Media. Yes, New Jersey. With summer now upon us, let's talk about the fact that we have to pay to walk on a beach in New Jersey. How are other states able to maintain beautiful, pristine beaches that are totally free to walk on? Somehow, they manage. Meanwhile, we get harassed by a 15-year-old checking for expensive beach badges. Seaside Park, Lavalette, and Bradley Beach charge $12 a day to go to the beach. Andrew, behind the glass, it's good to see you. How's everything?
I'm doing well, John.
That's good to hear. What is your favorite beach to go to in New Jersey?
Point Pleasant.
And do they charge you?
Yes.
What do you think about?
sad.
What do you think about that?
I wonder why.
Well, okay. It's for a good cause, I'm sure. Okay. My guest today is the co-founder and CEO of Arcade, a venture-backed sales engagement platform driving performance for thousands of retail stores across North America. David Cherrie is also serving as the marketing committee chairman for the Dallas Entrepreneurial Center, where he champions economic development through entrepreneurship. Originally from Australia, David now lives in Dallas, Texas, with his wife, Allison, and their son, West. Please welcome to the broadcast, Dave Cherrie. Dave, it's great to see you again.
You too, John. How are you?
I'm great. I think we first met, we were on a panel together at the All Wireless and Prepaid Expo in Vegas last August. Yeah,
and you spilt water on me.
I always like to make a great first impression. That's how I roll. Originally from Australia.
The land down under.
Yeah,
That's
good
right.
for you.
Yeah.
And now in Dallas, Texas?
Yeah, all the way really down south now. So I like
Okay.
to stay down south.
And I understand that you're a huge Dallas Cowboy fan.
Huge Dallas Cowboy fan. and
Okay. Well,
I'm glad you still have me on the podcast, even though
Well,
you found that out.
yeah, I did find that out. And, hey, 2 words for you. Go Birds. All right? Should be good. Well, welcome to New Jersey. And I understand this is the first time you've ever done a podcast.
It's the first time I've done something so fancy. You've got
Yeah,
a great setup here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we aim to please for all of our guests. So anyway, all right. So let's talk a little bit about Arcade.
Sure.
As we said in the intro, that you do frontline learning and all. And speaking with you over the last couple of days, why are you so passionate about frontline sales and retail wireless stores? Particularly, how has your experience helped shape the mission of this company?
Yeah, look, I think it all kind of comes down to where I started. I worked in retail. It's my first job, and I loved it. For the first few months, I was very engaged and highly productive.
What were you selling?
Well, initially I was selling surfboards, as every Australian needs to start doing. And then I went on a bit of a walkabout. So I spent 3 months traveling and backpacking the country and doing all sorts of different jobs, and came back and ended up getting a job, initially cold calling in telecom. So we would just have a dialer, and we would have to sell people 24-month contracts on the phone service over the phone, and we didn't know who they were or anything like that. So it really cut my teeth in sales there. And then I got a job in a actual wireless retail store.
Okay.
And I couldn't believe that customers actually wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
So made a big difference. So I started there, but after about 6 months, I felt like it was Groundhog Day, and I was just, collecting a paycheck, and as a result, my performance, my engagement dipped, my performance dipped, and I just saw a huge difference.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy work when I wasn't being successful, but I also didn't really have the motivation to try to be successful. And so my manager actually was the one that sort of inspired me, and he started to rethink how to motivate us as a team, and so he took the old school concept of incentives and employee of the month and sort of made it real time.
Okay.
And started doing daily incentives, and that made such a big difference to me. It made work much more fun, and we became one of the top performing stores in the country. And I think, honestly, John, I realized in that moment a couple of things. Number one, there's such a huge untapped potential in probably every business, really, but
Right.
especially frontline and especially in sales. And then the second thing is that, sales is a great door opener for the rest of your life.
Yes,
You know, I'm not
yes.
in frontline sales anymore.
Right.
My wife actually, she started selling photocopiers, you know, door to door to businesses, and my best friend sold video games at GameStop and Target. And they've gone on to do other things, but the soft skills that they learned in frontline sales really gave them that platform. And so, you know, I think we do something really cool at Arcade, which is help these frontline employees, you know, level up their skills, stay more engaged, be a bit more successful in their job. And as a result, I think it sets them up for life. So that's why I'm pretty passionate about it.
How did you get the courage to say, okay, now I'm going to start Arcade and bring this to the masses?
Honestly, it started, I had you know, I was always a good talker, you know, but I was a pretty bad walker. Yeah, so I was the ideas man, but someone else could go do the hard work. And there was actually a coworker that I had in my store, and he started a business and ended up losing quite a bit of money on the business.
And you said, I can do that.
Yeah, I can lose money. I just saw, you know, I saw all the other employees in the store just kind of think, oh, look at that guy, like what an idiot, you know. You know, how could he lose all that? Why would he do that? And I just thought to myself, that guy has some real cojones, you know. He's got that risk. And so I just grabbed him coffee one day. I said, hey man, I'd love to do something with you. I knew if I affiliated with people I wanted to be like, you know, it would help encourage me to be like that. And then long story short, we actually started a completely different company, ended up getting some investment from our first angel investor. And he said, I hate your idea, but I love you guys. And so he was investing in us, and he said he would invest on the condition that we did two things for sure, and the third was optional. The first was to quit university, and I was 5 years into a double degree in engineering and finance. And the second was to quit our jobs and go full-time into it. And the third was optional, but he highly encouraged it, and it was moved to America.
There you go.
So so I ended up doing all three. And we haven't looked back.
And how old is Arcade? How many years?
So Arcade is about 9 years, but it's really taken on two forms. I think we built a business. It was, you know, initially we were focused on tackling the communication problem in retail. So, you know, back pre-COVID, it was sort of the Wild West for, you know, team communication in the front line. You'd have employees that were on text, on GroupMe, on WhatsApp, on anything. And so there was no unity, no consolidation. So we had built a platform that did, you know, pretty comprehensive enterprise level communication. And our X factor was the engagement piece. Right. Okay. So we said, hey, we're not just a communication tool. We're also helping to unlock the potential of your workforce by running the real-time incentives and rewards and recognition. When COVID hit, we lost, you know, 75% of our business in what felt like overnight. And not only that, there was just this mass adoption of Microsoft Teams and Slack and these platforms that, you know, had billions of dollars of funding and were far bigger than we'll ever be, at least in that space. I think what we realized in that moment was we're not going to beat these guys. So we need to rethink the solution. And we decided, hey, we're going to effectively just make the engagement piece. That's going to be our sole focus.
Got it.
And we're actually going to integrate into those solutions so that they become force multipliers, if you will. If you already have Microsoft Teams, you know, across your organization, you can turn on Arcade, and it's very quickly, you know, across the team. So, so in that version of the company, it's only a couple of years old. Okay. You know, so I've really lived two lives, it feels.
A lot of people from my generation are old school salespeople. We carried the bag, the big heavy valise, and got, you know, doors slammed in our face and yelled at and this kind of stuff. But there's a new generation now of salespeople, the millennials, the Gen Zs. I want to know if you've uncovered a way to find out, or really uncovered what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And how has the owner of the retail store struggled or succeeded to engage with them?
What makes them tick is probably the same as what makes everybody tick. You know, we're all human at the end of the day. I think what is different, though, is the world they grew up in. So they grew up in a world where, you know, for me, as a millennial, you know, I was probably the interim generation. So when I was a kid, we didn't have mobiles. You know, we call them mobiles, you call them cell phones. I remember my dad got the first, color Nokia, and it had bounce on it. And even when I was, 19, I would have to go on a desktop to use Facebook. So I sort of grew up in a world
Excuse me, that sounds like a real millennial problem.
Yeah.
I can't get Facebook on my handset. I have to on my mobile. I have to use my desktop. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It is true. And so we grew up in this sort of world where I remember, having to make landline calls to my friends, organize time, going to the movies or something. And you had to just turn up when you said you'd turn up and be where you said you'd be. And then, the Gen Zs have grown up effectively with technology out of the crib. So they've had, cell phones that have had internet, that has had video. And so they've had this world of sort of instant gratification, instant feedback, and also honestly social validation is sort of a currency. And so we're all human. We all want social validation. We've just had it differently in terms of the technology that's been available to us. So I think what's really making millennials and Gen Zs tick is always the same things. It's just how it's administered.
Okay.
And I think that's really what we've sort of helped to unlock is, we've taken the fundamentals of social media, and gamification, instant gratification, using the technology that's available now through, APIs and integrations, and really just creating it in a way that would be digested and received well by the Gen Zs and by millennials.
Okay.
To stay focused on their goals, to be successful, to have fun at work. I think that's a really big part of it. And ultimately, I think to help curb what I think is sort of this almost negative spiral that retailers and just employers in general, but particularly organizations that have a higher, entry-level workforce, where they're so jaded by they don't understand the worker, they don't understand the new type of employee, the lack of ambition or the lack of work ethic. The employees don't stay long enough, so there's this high churn, and as a result, they just kind of go, what's the point in investing in these guys,
And that's a mistake.
It is.
It is a mistake.
Every business leader knows inherently that their organization is as strong as the team is.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have a strong team. But they kind of just see it as cost of doing business. I'm just dealing with these kids. And every now and then you find a good one.
Which is not a path to success for any retailer, whether it's in wireless or anything.
It's certainly not a path to progress. It's really hard to grow a business when you're constantly just in a replacement cycle.
Let's break it down to the basics. I know that any retail store doesn't have customers in it unless you're Macy's or somewhere, but a small independent retail dealer or even someone that owns carrier branded stores for our big carriers here. Sometimes and many times there's no one in the store. And that's when we say you should be doing training, but without a formal program or an incentive, as you said, to do the training. They're on Facebook or they're, playing Wordle or God bless them. But break it down to the basics on what the arcade program not forces them to do, but requires them to do, and the benefit both to them and to the retail store owner.
I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, just there. We're not really competing against a fair playing field.
Yeah.
We're competing against TikTok and YouTube. And actually what employees' biggest challenge is how do I capture the attention of these frontline associates?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the key, is that what's going to get their attention when there's no one in the store? What are they going to be doing?
Right.
And more than likely they're on social media. So, I'm not going to say that we stop them doing social media at all, but we certainly give them motivation to do things more productive. So what Arcade does is it provides them basically training quests. Right. So they, in their free time, can do these training quests. So they could, watch, go through like a quiz. They could learn about a certain product. There's peer-to-peer learning that we're now introducing, and we could talk about that a bit later. But effectively, they get to effectively learn about products or about promotions, and then we also enroll them into incentives thereafter. So not only do I learn about the product that, it's the new phone or it's the new plan, but now I get paid instantly a small reward if I actually start to sell it. So, what was, traditionally training is sort of this thing that everybody knows they have to do, and they believe it's like there is an ROI to it, there is an impact to it, but it's really hard to put your finger on it. I think what we do is we basically say, hey, training is something that reps now want to do, because if they do it and they learn how to sell this product, and our training's super simple.
Yeah.
It's like a TikTok story. It's what are the 2 or 3 things you need to know about it? What are the 1 or 2 objections you're going to hear, and how to handle those?
Okay.
What's maybe one question you can ask that could open the door? That's it.
And it's
That's all they need.
It's self-driven.
It's self-driven,
Yeah.
and if they do it, then they can then start earning for that
Good.
product. So the more they do, the more things they can earn from.
Okay.
And they're inherently motivated to do that. And then our payouts happen. They're digital points, just like a credit card program.
Okay.
But imagine you're a minimum wage employee.
Right.
It's Friday afternoon.
Right.
You're here in New Jersey. And,
What could be better?
what could be better? And
You're paying to walk on the beach, but go ahead, yes.
you've got to save up your $12 to walk on the beach
That's
tomorrow.
right,
And you
that's
don't want to
right.
look silly in front of your girlfriend.
Right.
And you need that money. And so what you can do is you can do a couple of trainings, and then the next few customers that walk in, if you do a really good job in selling those products, you actually get paid out in real time through our app.
Nice.
You can cash that out to
Nice.
Venmo, PayPal, straight to
Nice.
bank. So you've got those options as well. So I think that really speaks to that generation to want to do it. Last thing I'll say,
Yep.
when I worked in retail, we would have these 40-minute long modules we'd
Right.
have to do. Training was just basically compliance. I didn't learn anything about
Right.
it. And we would have somebody in our store who frankly hated sales. They would sit in the back room. They would have a phone with all of the answers on there, and they'd have all of our logins, and they'd go through each one of our training and click through the answers and do it all for us. And that was training.
That's
So, I think ultimately the goal isn't compliance. The goal is for them to learn. And really the way to do that is to give them an incentive to want to learn.
Yeah. And like anything else, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
The more you put in, the more you get out. And quite frankly, it's if you want anybody, Mark Clare, who's our head of sales on the team, he says, compensation drives behavior,
Right,
behavior
absolutely.
drives results.
Yes.
And so it's like, hey, what results are you getting? Let me, if they're poor, I can show you what the incentives are. And
Good.
if we rejig those incentives to the right behaviors, you can really change
Excellent.
the trajectory.
Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit. Every trade show you go to, any tech program you watch, is the one buzzword is AI. AI, artificial intelligence. Right?
Yeah. Is that what it means?
That's what it means, yes.
Glad I finally know.
Yeah, we call it AI because we don't know what it means. But anyway, it's everywhere you look, and it's in the news more and more now. What does frontline sales look like
in this new world?
In this new world, and is AI going to have an impact on frontline sales? Now, we reported a couple weeks ago as there are a lot of people that T-Mobile and their corporate-owned stores are having people join their app, and the sales guy or girl in the store when they walk in is saying, "Do you have the app?" No. Okay, let's put the app on. They get compensated for that, but they want the customer to be completely self-service when they're in a T-Mobile branded store.
Yeah,
whether it's dealer or whether it's corporate-owned. That I think the beginning salvo of this whole AI thing. What's your thoughts on how this is going to change Frontline?
There's a couple of areas that I think ultimately we're going to see. I think number one, the main question is, why do people go into a cell phone store? And I think, everybody thought that it would be displaced with internet, e-com sales, and that hasn't been the case. And so the question is why? I think ultimately people want to touch and feel, a pretty large investment, and quite frankly is a third appendage now is your cell phone device.
Yep.
So it's very deeply personal. And there's still a lot of complications, a lot of questions people have. And so I think AI will definitely help with solving those. And I think like a lot of retail, there will be an element that's more self-service. Like I walked into a McDonald's the other day, you can order from the cash register or from the screen, but there's still employees there. So I think there will be still a need for that frontline sales force. Where I think AI is going to be really powerful is in how it equips those frontline salespeople, in how it ramps them quickly, especially in telecom and other forms of retail where you've got high subject matter expertise that you need, both to use the processes and programs to facilitate the service, But also just there's constantly changing products, constantly changing promotions and
Right.
pricing. So there's always change, and I think AI will really help these frontline reps learn better. It'll help reps role play. I think one of the biggest challenges that any organization has, especially in sales, is to get reps to practice sales. Because either they don't take it seriously if they know the person too well, or it's too awkward and they don't really replicate a real life. So I think AI can really help with that. And then lastly, I think that AI is going to do more around understanding that customer interaction. So what I mean by that is if you think about inside sales, telesales, pretty much everywhere you have sales except for face-to-face, you have everything happening over Zoom and it's being recorded by an AI agent. That AI is then transcripting the entire call. The AI, then you have like tools and software programs that will then distill insights out of that, then help coach or help the sales managers coach to those insights. You have none of that in retail. Right. So I think the next sort of frontier for retail is to now start to capture that customer interaction, because we're capturing it in literally every other part of our lives except for when you walk into a retail store. Okay. And if you can capture that customer interaction, then you can help coach that employee better to how to do that better. And AI can provide recommendations throughout that sales interaction process. So that customer's getting a much richer experience. And I think that's where AI is really going to, I almost liken it to, you've got Mario and you've got the mushroom. AI is the mushroom, and then you got Mario's the sales rep. And when they have that mushroom, they become super giant flamethrowing Mario. And I think that that's going to be a huge improvement to the customer experience in store.
You mentioned peer-to-peer learning. Arcade recently acquired Updo, a sales as a service platform for peer-to-peer training on the mobile device. And Dr. Wei's son, who was a CEO, is a good friend, was a podcast guest. Why did you pursue this acquisition, and what's the vision on how Updo is going to fit into the Arcade mission?
Firstly, Dr. Wei's son, he is one of the smartest guys I know, and I'm incredibly privileged and blessed to be able to work alongside him. I think when I first met Updo and the team, it was at CES a couple of years ago, and we had just, rebuilt our entire solution, rebuilt our business effectively from the ground up. And I remember just being enamored by this. And the reason is because I fundamentally understood the use case. When I worked in retail and I wasn't doing too well in a certain KPI or metric, I never went to the LMS. I never called the trainer. What did I do? I went to the rep in our store who was really good at it and asked them what they did. And that's how I learned. I learned from peers. And actually, I think one of the implications of not solving employee turnover is the brain drain you have, because you have these employees with amazing institutional knowledge that leave. And in retail, you don't have the benefit of people working alongside each other and this natural osmosis that happens. They're in completely different geographical areas and different shifts and different stores. So what their platform did brilliantly was connect employees with each other and facilitate a 5 to 7 minute conversation, like a FaceTime call between two employees, where it's topical.
But it's not in the same store.
Not in the same store. So they could be across the other side of the country. And what would happen is those employees would share the best practices with each other. Well, what happened after that is then you would see a true material incremental lift in sales from those stores. So that's why I loved it. Where I see the potential is they then started developing some really deep AI tech, and the AI being able to now review those calls, not only ensure quality, but also extract from those calls either best practices and create on the fly new content that can be fed straight into the rest of the team, so that it starts to spread those best practices, but also identify gaps in knowledge where like our AI can actually see, hey, there's multiple employees across the country that are really struggling with this concept
Right.
or with this product or with this objection. And so that insight is what the trainers need or the retailer needs to then know exactly what to go solve. And then on top of that, we now have the fundamental framework to start to enable what I was sharing before around simulating role play. So what I mean by that is you can feed into it the personas that you have as a retailer. So you might have the young, 20-year-old who's going to college, and then you have the single parent with 3 kids that's trying to connect them. And, so you have your personas, you can plug that in to the platform and it will simulate a role play interaction with that rep and give real objections. And the rep can practice against something that's going to be kind of like interactive.
Right.
And so long story short, I just fully believe in what they do. I've seen the results of what they do, and it's incredibly impressive. And so if I was to distill it, it is they really figured out how to truly upskill people.
Okay.
And
Upskill.
And what we did with Arcade is we had figured out how to truly create the will for people to do behaviors.
Okay.
And so what the fundamental, I think, match in heaven is we use Arcade to motivate employees to do the Updo sessions. And that's what's really, so we're giving them the will to upskill. And that's what's really powerful about the acquisition. And so that's sort of the driving force behind it.
And with all these good things that you've done, how has your sales trajectory been over the last 12 months versus the previous 24, 36 months?
Honestly, gangbusters. I think we did a couple of things. The use case is enormous. It's global. The challenge is global to solve. You've got frontline associates and, in every retail, but also every SDR, every field sales. What we were doing prior is we were really selling to everybody, and it was hard to sort of get that kind of, that traction with the go-to-market.
Yes.
We 2 years ago made a conscious decision to solely focus on telecom and wireless retail. It's a slow burn. They really make you work for it in this industry.
Okay.
You have to get the right integrations, the right partnerships, the right approvals. And so, by doing all of that, though, it's really started to accelerate sales and things like that. And to me, it's more about just it's accelerated our impact. I think we've, we went from a few thousand employees to now tens of thousands of employees, using the platform every day, which is really
terrific.
Cool.
Congratulations. I'm not going to ask you what you wish you knew now versus what you knew then, but what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur like yourself who was looking to bring to life a solution in a startup space?
Ultimately, I think make sure it's a problem that you either have passion for because you've got empathy for it, like you've lived it, or you've really invested in learning about the problem itself and really believe in the solution, because it is really tough. And it's, I think ultimately what gets you through is persistence. And it's really hard to be, to get up in the morning for something you don't truly believe in. So I think that's number one. Number two is to really focus on distribution early. I think as entrepreneurs, we get so caught up in product and we get caught up in vision and all of the things it can be. But when it comes down to it, what really matters is how quickly can you distribute it? How scalable is that? So I think figuring that out early is really important, because that also guides the ideas that maybe aren't as good as you thought that they were.
Okay.
And I think ultimately as an entrepreneur, it's more important what you say no to than what you say yes to. So, having those guiding principles of knowing, or at least making sure that you've got a real clear path to distribution early on is important, especially if you're going to get into the wireless retail space. That's really important.
Good. And taking criticism when, as an entrepreneur, you know more than anybody. What about people that have been around giving you advice, whether you think it's sound or not?
Everything people give you, tell you, including what I've shared as advice to, just then, actually, 50% of it's probably not that useful, but 50% of it's gold. And it's your job as the entrepreneur to not take it all on, because half of it's not useful and actually maybe distracting.
Is it, you have to balance what's
your job is to figure out what's the gold.
Right.
So for me, what it's really done is it's meant that I take everything people share with me really seriously, and I dig through it, but you've got to have your own convictions, and sometimes as an entrepreneur, especially when you're starting off, you want to, listen to everybody. And so you get thrust from one side to the next and what have you. Or you're just super stubborn and you think it's your way or the highway.
Yeah.
And then you end up going the wrong direction.
Right.
And so I think it's really important just to be, my wife says, be stubborn about your goals and flexible about your methods. And I think that's really important in that kind of conversation.
Okay. My consultant company focuses on the carriers, the MVNOs, the aggregators, and all the hundreds of companies that support them and all the functions they need. How in your mind has the carrier authorized retailer client changed over the last couple of years?
Well, certainly, I miss the Wild Wild West days. I hear about them fondly from Mark and others that have been, in the industry for a few decades.
Yeah.
So I've kind of come in the last, say, 6 to 5 years. And I think in that time, what I've seen is there's been a pretty substantial consolidation, especially in the carriers that have, kind of built their footprint through authorized resellers. So there's been a consolidation. So I think the carriers no longer want to deal with 300 individual owners. They want to deal with 20 or 30. And so that is, I think, increasing the sophistication of the dealers and the authorized retailers, which I think is a positive thing, because what they want to have is more consistency between their corporate-owned stores and their dealer-owned stores. There is growth, absolutely. So there's stores that are opening. You see the Total brands, you see some of the internet brands, but there isn't the same sort of land grab like there was, right? And so I think now it's about really figuring out what stores, what markets are the best kind of fit for. Okay. And then third is I think there's just sort of this intersection, and this is something that I figured out not early, but I just started questioning. I was like, well, why would I pay, $120 for a postpaid plan when I get the same thing for half that price on prepaid? Yeah. And what I learned is, like, I'm an Australian, so I don't care. We sold in our store postpaid and prepaid. There was no difference, really. It was just how you want to pay for it. But over here, there was sort of like, I think like a stigma in a way of like, you're on a prepaid versus a postpaid.
Yes, it was. And MVNOs were created here and probably across the world to give the people that were not bankable, that didn't have great credit, were low income, and give them an opportunity to be a full mobile player in talk, text, and data and everything else for lower than you would get from the carriers, because obviously they had no towers, no infrastructure, no network, and everything that goes along to that. So that was a big piece of the, what they paid wholesale. That was much less than what they would have been paying to have their own network ops. And and it was a stigma. It was, they used to call it, they still do, the burner phone. It was used by certain crime families, and it was, for people that were doing things that may or may not have been illegal at the time. And it's now become, mainstream. I mean, you look at, we talked about it many times. You look at the carriers, the three big carriers over the last 3 to 5 years have bought the TracFone Group. Metro by
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile is now Ultra, Mint. I know I'm at Cricket. I'm sure I'm missing one. So it is mainstream now. It's not becoming mainstream, in my belief. But I talked to a gentleman today who has an MVNO. He's been in business for about 6 months, and he offers both. Which is surprising. And it's 65% prepaid, 35% postpaid, which tells you that there still is that customer that just, doesn't want to forget to re-up or pay his bill and not get shut off for a day or two. He just wants to know that I'm paying it just like my cable bill. I'm paying it in advance. And the line is really blurred between prepaid and postpaid.
It has. And I think that would probably be the big thing is, even the pricing. And if you go to a prepaid where you get discounts to go on auto pay. And so you're on auto pay, really what's the difference? And I think probably, back when this started, if you own the towers, yes, you had to give a certain amount of bandwidth to MVNOs. but you got priority.
Yes.
So, and there was probably a distinct difference in
Right.
priority when you're with one of the main, carriers
Right.
versus when you're with an MVNO. Whereas now I think the technology's caught up that the difference isn't all that much. And so
if at all.
So recently, personally, I went off a postpaid carrier where I was spending hundreds of dollars, a quarter, and to spending, a few $100 for the entire year.
Yeah.
And I haven't skipped a beat.
Good.
I haven't noticed a difference. And so I think that's probably the big shift.
That is a great endorsement for the MVNO business.
Yeah.
And Dave, thank you for that. Last question, maybe. What events, if any, will Arcade be going to this year so people can, press the flesh with you and Mark and the rest of your staff and find out more about how they can be successful?
We're always attempting to be at all the events that are wireless retail centric.
Okay.
So particularly where there's retail operators.
Okay.
The big one you mentioned earlier, which is the all wireless prepaid show.
August,
it's really that's in August. I think Vegas again.
Yes, it is. August in Vegas, you can't beat it.
Can't beat it. It's hot as anything, so you just got to spend time indoors.
Indoors, yes. Yeah.
But that's always a good time,
Okay.
and we'll be there, and then there's a couple of other, if you're part of the the big point of sale vendors, we're attending some of those their events.
Great. David, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today about the success and the future plans for Arcade. If somebody wants to reach out and find out more about Arcade or possibly engage, how do they do that?
Visit arcade.co. So that's .co.
That's right on the screen. No M. Arcade.co.
CO, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, all right. Good.
We wanted to buy the .com, but it's millions of dollars.
Yes,
so
okay. So,
but arcade.co and just schedule time with us. Our approach is very, if we can help you, we'll show you how. If we can't, we'll be straight up.
Okay.
But we'll sit down with you. We'll jump on a Zoom call and talk more about how we could potentially support. And so we'd love to meet you if it's something you're interested in.
Well, great. I don't know if I mentioned this at the top of the broadcast or not, but this is the first time you've done a podcast.
It is the first time I've done a podcast with such an elaborate studio and high quality producer in Andrew, and just a fantastic host like yourself.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
It's a real privilege.
This is all green screen for those of you who are out there. Now, this is real. This is all real. Thank you very much. Well, listen, Dave Cherrie, great job. Continued success, and we look forward to seeing you out in the field and hearing more about you. And we're going to have you back in a few months and find out what this podcast did for you. And I'm sure you're going to be on every podcast in America now.
Well, real privilege. Thank you, John.
All right, good. Dave Cherrie at arcade.co. That's going to wrap up another edition of the Boon of Wireless podcast. Reach out to us. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, we'll see you next time. Do you want to be a guest on the Boon of Wireless podcast? Give us a call at 908-THE-BOON. Yes, 908-843-2666.